A big hello from Portland, Oregon. Yay! Welcome to another episode of B2B Marketing and More. Today, I have a fantastic episode. I know that. But seriously, this time we have an awesome guest. I don't subscribe to a lot of newsletter, but I subscribe to his. My guest today is Kevan Lee. He is the head of marketing at Oyster, a distributor HR platform to help company to take care of their global teams. Imagine that. And he was also ex-CMO at Buffer, which is a tool I used for a long time. In addition to that, he has worked very closely with Philly and the Poly, some of a very popular SaaS-based platform. So welcome, Kevan. So happy to have you.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. It was wonderful that you worked at Buffer for a long period of time, and I am a long-time Buffer user. So can you tell us a little bit about your experience in Buffer and how did you ramp the marketing and help them increase the user? And what are the couple of things you did and also a couple of the lessons that you can share with us?
I was lucky enough to join Buffer as employee number 17.
Ooh, wow.
Very early days there, which was
Yes.
great and exciting. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. It was my first job in what I call like real tech startup scene. I worked at Vox before that and a couple other spots, but the pace and the excitement was unlike anything I'd experienced before. One of my first jobs at Buffer was a bit around this idea of category creation and then using content marketing as an engine for our growth. And so I came in and really kind of built out the content scene there. I was lucky enough to join with another really great teammate who was kind of another content person. She ended up going down the people and operations path, and then I stayed on the marketing path.
You end up staying the dark side, yes. I mean, yeah, she actually being, salvaged, and you just like stick around on the dark side. Yeah, I get it.
Yes, yeah. And so I had a lot of fun there, though. It was great, and so content was really the biggest thing that we did.
Talk to us a little bit about content, what you did that was so special and unique compared with the other company. And what is your approach?
Initially, one of the big things was guest posting, and that was before I joined, but our co-founder was really prolific in his guest posting strategy. And so he would go out and find different blogs that were strategically aligned with the type of customers that might make sense for Buffer, and then write articles for those blogs, deliver value to that audience, and add a link to Buffer here and there.
And bring the traffic back to the Buffer website.
Bring the traffic back to Buffer. And I think it did a couple of things. So it did that, but it also brought a lot of backlinks to our site, which helped with our domain and our search authority and things. So that was really critical, like first step.
Can I interrupt for 1 second? For that, did you guys hire writers to do it, or he did everything on his own?
We did everything ourselves. Yeah.
People don't understand that the guest post outreach takes a lot of time, and then you have to coordinate it, find a topic, and also you have to send it to them, and then you also have to make sure that they actually follow up. It's a lot of work. It's incredibly time consuming. So I admire the co-founder's effort to actually do that flawlessly, and that's hard to do. And especially you do it in-house.
Yeah, the strategy we took is that we would pitch something as if it was already written. And so we'd say, we have written 3 things on these topics. Would you like them? And if they say yes, then we would go and write them real fast. And
I have it. And then you turn around like, no, I really don't have it.
It's in our head. We had it in our head. We didn't really commit to anything until we got like the full approval of, yes, this is already chosen. Let's go for it. And so it helped a little bit.
Got it.
But from there, scaling our content library was kind of my biggest undertaking at Buffer. And so we went from a very B2C approach, the growth of content from that perspective around social media and viral content. We talked a lot about productivity and life hacking.
Yeah.
And so I shifted gears to more of a keyword-driven approach around social media topics. And so we really built our authority on social media and then distributed that content through SEO. And so the way to do that effectively is you just have to really own all the search engine result pages. So own the SERPs.
Yeah.
And that meant writing 4 to 5 articles a week that were 1,500 to 2,000 words and just like going for it.
Do you do that yourself though? Because that is very much a high frequency. You create 4 to 5 blog posts. That means you literally publish 1 post every day. And I assume you did that for a good period of time. And you couple that with the SEO and also keywords. You try to optimize that. Do you do that in-house or do you actually outsource that to outside writers or the freelancers to do it?
Well, for better or worse, I did it all myself at Buffer, so we did it all in-house. I worked on 3 posts at a time, and so one post would be at the research stage, another post would be at the writing stage, and then one post would be at like the final edit stage, and then it would just kind of cascade day after day. So there's always like the next thing up gets researched the following day, next thing up gets written and edited, and then like the final edits. It was almost like a machine process after a while, which I think I burned out after 18 months.
I wouldn't be surprised. I was like, how can you sustain it? And on top of it, I'm sure you wore multiple hats. It's not just the content creation and content writer. You probably took care of a lot of stuff. So how do you find that balance?
One of the things that made it easy to continue at that pace was seeing positive results. That was great.
Yeah,
I think I get a lot of joy out of the feedback loop of content. Like you publish something, you get feedback right away on people visiting or commenting or sharing.
yeah.
So that was really great. When it came to the success of that content, I think it was helpful because it didn't force us to have to do a lot of other things. Like
Got it. So that's your primary engine in terms of driving traffic. So that's a channel that you focus, and then that you don't do like a multi-channel or omni-channel approach.
Right.
You focus on just using the content, and that's your core piece, if you will, and then use that to do a marketing outreach, drive traffic back to the website.
Exactly. Yeah. We didn't have any paid ads that we ran. We didn't have a
Yeah.
formal sales team, so there was no need for marketing support there. I would say it was probably like if you consider like Google's 20% rule, where you have like 80% of your core work during the week, then your final 20% of your time is spent on other things. It was
Okay.
probably the similar balance, like 80% on content, 20% on whatever else happened to fall my way.
For you, in terms of from my perspective, listening to what you just said, and you focus on the core content, that means you really, really worked very, very hard to use the keywords and also the search to optimize your content. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Yeah. I would say that I'm by no means a technical SEO expert. Took like an 80-20. There's those numbers, same numbers again, an 80-20
80/20
principle.
rules, yeah.
Yeah. Of like, I can understand 80% of what I need to about SEO and get really far with it. And so it wasn't like putting together really deep technical SEO analysis. It was more like when I do a Google search, these are the related keywords that show up at the bottom. And so we're going to target those based on this higher topic. And so it was very like it was a very intuitive approach that saved us a lot of time, but got us most of the way to where we needed to be.
Can I also ask one more question? So, what tools did you use at that time?
So I didn't use a tool. So that makes it easy to share. I didn't have a proper SEO tool when I was building out the strategy. We used Google Analytics and Google Search Console to check the performance of them, but in terms of optimization and strategy, we didn't have a tool. Eventually, we did add Ahrefs as our tool, and now at Oyster, we use SEMrush as our tool. And so now, yes, but then no.
Obviously, you leverage content initially when you started. And I know you probably also talked to many, many startup and especially SaaS-based platform companies. Do you have any advice for a new startup that the marketing team that's working for basically the early stage or even a little bit like a Series B, Series C? So they actually have more funding. Do you have any advice for them in terms of how they should approach marketing and how your advice in terms of how sales and marketing should work together?
I'll give you the unpopular answer, which is it depends, but I won't leave it at that.
I don't think that's unpopular. I really think that's the core of the answer
Yeah.
nowadays, especially in digital marketing. Many B2B marketers are looking for the shortcut or they are looking for the best practice. But they have to understand that even if you go to sessions, like I teach workshop and the sessions, even if people come to my sessions, I always tell them that whatever I'm telling you as my framework and my templates may not apply to you 100%. You somehow need to modify it. If you know how to modify it, that means you know what I'm saying and also how that apply to your company. So I love your answer of it depends. So talk to me more.
Thank you. I feel like you let me off the hook, so I appreciate that. If it depends, these are the things I think it depends on, is maybe the best way to answer that. One of the biggest things is what is your go to market motion? Are you sales led or are you product led? I think that'll dictate how you think about the different channels and investments that you make.
Let me paraphrase it. Your business model, how you sell does matter.
Absolutely. Yes,
Okay.
100%. Who you're selling to matters. And so, an example of that at Buffer, we were selling to folks at the small business level. And so, what that meant for us is that we were able to achieve a really large scale but our average revenue per user was quite low. And so it was $15 on average.
Yeah, then that's hard to grow the revenue. Doesn't matter. Your value has to be incredibly huge to reach your revenue goal. Yes.
Yeah, if you're going to do that, you have to get scale on the user side. And so in order to get scale, you have to choose your channels and strategies that match to scale. And so for us, SEO is a huge channel in terms of scale and scope because Google is such a huge surface area for us. And so that matched with our philosophy there. Also, SEO is free beyond the people resources. And so if we're getting $15 per user, we're not going to have a ton of money right away to reinvest into things. So you have to think about those.
Yeah, your cost per acquisition cannot be $20.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, we had to have those things in balance. I think if you have a sales-led organization where you're selling into mid-market or enterprise, your deal values are going to be higher. Potentially then paid channels become possible for you. You might have a longer sales cycle, so you have to consider that. So lots of these different factors come into play. I would say if there's any like blanket advice, I think product marketing is more important today than it was 5 years ago, 3 years ago. Like I think it's becoming more and more important because it is such a almost like a generalist role within a team. Like depending on the product marketer you hire, they may have specialties across the board, or they may just have like jack of all trades in a way. And so I would say if you have to optimize for something, optimize for that, or optimize for someone with a really strong data mindset, especially like as an early hire who can build out some of the foundation, some of the learning, so that you understand if I'm going to try all these things, how will I feel confident that they're working? And I think having someone on your team who can give you that confidence is important.
There's another thing I would like to ask you specifically is how did a buffer or even at your current company, like if you started, your business model is actually for small business owners. What is your recommendation for marketers that's supporting their sales team and their sales team based on the SaaS-based platform that they offer? They now need to reach out to enterprise customers. But for a long time, the marketing team tend to focus on SMB. So how do you suggest the marketers to do to make that transition to support, say, SMB-centric type of customer in relationship to, say, enterprise?
It's a really big jump.
I know. I'm a B2B marketer and I never really support SMB. And I tend to focus on enterprise segments of it. Then when I talk to a marketers that are actually incredibly nimble and agile and doing things very fast, they tend to have a hard time supporting the enterprise segment. So I want to hear your feedback on that.
It's a totally different segment. I think first and foremost, you have to understand the ideal customer profile or your buyer personas, like whatever you use there, like, because they're going to be totally different people. They're going to have different titles. They're going to have different expectations. They're going to have different pain points. There's going to be a totally different buying process at the enterprise level than there is at the SMB level. It's almost like forget everything you know and go learn all of this.
Depends on individuals. Like for me, it gets me very excited to learn new customer segments, new industry segments. And that was about 10 years ago. Okay, I was like, oh my God, new segments. I get to know more about them. That's good. Now I was like, really? Do I have to learn another segment? That's way too much for me. I cannot take it anymore.
Too many segments.
But I hear you. So you basically said whatever you think is working for SMB may not work for enterprise. You basically have to unlearn everything and then relearn it.
When you're marketing to enterprise, you need to provide them with materials throughout a much longer buying process than you probably used to on the SMB side.
I totally agree.
Resources, testimonials, case studies, use cases, third-party reviews. Like there's just so much content that you need to give to them in education and hand-holding. It's like a full-time job.
It is. In a way, it is.
Yeah.
So can I also ask you one more question? You brought a very good point and you hit the core in terms of marketing to enterprise is very, very different than SMB. And I agree. And the purchasing cycle tend to be longer. I agree with that too. And you need more content to actually facilitate the buying cycle. I agree with that. So the next question for you is how do you measure marketing's contribution? Because the purchasing cycle is so long and you have ICP, you kind of facilitate that. You have NQL converted to SQL, marketing qualified leads to sales qualified lead. But the purchasing cycle is so long. How do you measure the success and also contribution to sales when they close the deal?
We have a couple of different ways that we do it at Oyster. So we have different pipeline targets that we measure at the top and then all the way through the different stages. So from lead to meeting to opportunity to closed one, like we have insight into each of those stages and how well we're moving people along. And so if we were to focus as a marketing team on getting folks from one step to the next, we can measure how much lift we had from one time period to the next.
So talk to me a little bit about that. Elaborate a little bit more if you can. Does that mean that at each purchase stage that there is a goal set up for the marketing team?
We don't have that today, but if we wanted to measure that, we could goal ourselves on that.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So today, a lot of the focus is at the end stage. And so what we goal ourselves on is win rate. And that's a goal that we share with sales, but it's something that we feel that marketing has a really big role to play in. And so you're right, it is a bit kind of fuzzy. Like, what did marketing specifically contribute to? What did sales specifically contribute to? So we kind of removed that fuzziness and just said, like, we are all playing the same game here. We're on the same team. Let's just think of it holistically in those terms. And so win rate is one that we look at. Another piece of it that we're starting to measure this quarter is how many times our reasons why we win come up in the deals that we win. And so if we as a marketing team believe that these are the 3 things that we want to be true of our business and our product, how often are our customers repeating that back to us when they choose our product? That will tell us that our positioning is going well.
Also will dictate in terms of the content you're going to create in the future.
It will. And it will force us to be clear on why we win.
And also that will help on value propositions and messaging framework.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yay, everything is connected.
It's like a universal goal. Yes.
Exactly.
Those are the best goals. Like when it seems like it's one thing, but it's actually so many things. If you can have one goal that touches all those different areas, that's the ideal.
If you are in it with the sales team and you guys have a unified win rate, and can you also talk to us in terms of the marketing automation tool and also CRM that you use, and are these 2 tools integrated?
They are, yeah. So Salesforce and HubSpot are the 2 that we use, and they're both integrated one-to-one basis. So everything that's in one is in the other, and then we push all that information into a business intelligence tool called Looker. And so Looker is how we view all of the data dashboards and things across the company.
Is that very similar to Tableau?
Yes.
Basically business intelligence or analytics platform that you actually create a dashboard that pull data from different sources and you guys can look at the dashboards together collectively.
Exactly. Yep. Same thing as Tableau.
Okay. Very, very good. Let's switch the gear a little bit. I love your newsletter and you publish on weekly basis. And I only publish my newsletter on monthly basis because I'm incredibly busy with client work. And I love your newsletter. Can you talk to our listeners and also the people who are watching this video? Talk to us about your newsletter, how you gather information. You wrote long form content, which is your newsletter is a long form and it's packed with a lot of relevant and useful information. How do you gather that information? And I love to encourage my listeners and also the people who watch this video to subscribe.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I have a lot of self-doubt about how effective my newsletter is sometimes because I don't spend as much time on it as I would like to spend. So I think what I've found are some shortcuts and hacks to actually get it out every week. I think if I had 8 more hours each week, it would be much better than it is. So thank you for liking it in its current state. I appreciate that. I usually end up writing about the things that are actually happening
to
me that week. And so I don't have to go and think about this whole new topic and figure out how to message it. It's more like it's already in my brain. I've kind of been thinking of it throughout the week and I can just get it out.
So it's kind of like a journal. It's like you're journaling like what happened for that week and you pick 1 or 2 nugget and then you expand that. Is that fair to say?
I think that's fair to say, yeah. So the format of it, there's some links at the top and then, like you mentioned, the long form below. And so the links at the top, for those, I'm basically curating from curators. And so I will subscribe to lots of newsletters, pull the stuff that resonates with me and add it to mine. And then, yeah, for the long form piece, it's more about just transparently sharing the things on my mind during the week.
So where can the listeners or the people who watch the video subscribe your newsletter? Where should they go?
You can go to my website, which is kevanlee.com, or you can go straight to the Substack, which is kevanlee.substack.com.
All right. Another question I would like to ask you is, what is your daily routine to be an effective leader? Obviously, you are managing a marketing team for a company. So what do you do and how do you keep yourself sane in such an intense marketing environment? Because a lot of things tend to happen and there's always last minute request.
I tend to think of how can I be a great person.
Oh, that's so sweet. I was like, okay, how can I just get through today? Should I just drink a lot? I'm talking about tea.
Yes. Fluids, yes.
Or
No,
water.
yeah, I have those days also. I think the way that I approach my day to day for marketing is just so intertwined with day life as a parent and as a partner. Kind of have to think of them all under one bucket. I start my days very early. I start at 5:30.
Oh,
I roll.
wow. When did you go to sleep, may I ask?
Well, I go to sleep at like 10. So
Oh, that's pretty good. Okay,
yeah,
so yeah, 5 o'clock, that's good. I usually
more.
don't go to sleep until 1, so I usually don't get
Oh,
up until like 8:30. Oh no, not good.
so we get the same amount of sleep. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I start early. I work with a worldwide team, and so there's stuff happening when I get online
yeah,
quite early,
yeah.
and I can catch up to what's happened when I was asleep. And so getting up at 5:30 also allows me then to start my day early, but end early as well. And so I get
Mhm.
to take my son to school. I get to pick him up from school, and then kind of we have a longer time with family at the end of the day. And so that's important to me. It helps me kind of stay balanced and centered. And then I think at work, then I do have kind of this dedicated time to be fully focused into that work period, like while he's at school or while the family is sleeping, and being fully present, whether I'm at home or at work. I mean, I'm at home all the time because I work from home, but mentally at home or at work, I think is really important. From a leadership side, I believe that being empathetic toward your people, building a team with trust and respect and affirmation are kind of the pillars. And so trying to align with those things is how I think those are the principles that guide the way that I work.
Yeah, very nice. Excellent. So last question. What are the 2 books that marketers must read, especially when they work in a startup environment? Do you have any suggestions? Love to hear from you.
Yeah, there's a really interesting one called, I think it's called Uncanny Valley, that came out last year.
Uncanny Valley?
It is about startup life. So it's not necessarily how to be a better startup marketer. It's just about like, can you believe?
Like all the crap that happens?
Yeah. Can you believe what a weird world we live in? But in terms of actual marketing tactics and strategy, 2 of the ones that I've really enjoyed, one of them is called Alchemy. It's written by Rory Sutherland. He works with the Ogilvy agency, and it's all about kind of the psychology of why consumers act the way that we act. The spoiler is that we don't really know why we act the way that we act, but marketers can kind of steer us that direction.
Do we really need to read that book at the end? It's like, you know what? We're just humans. We don't know how we act the way we act. But somehow you need to find out.
We need to as marketers, yes. Yes, we do. And there's a book called Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, which is really great, also just around like more the bigger picture strategic thinking. Strategy was one of the hardest things for me to figure out when I switched from like individual contributor work to people management and leadership. So I really gained from books.
Yeah, you brought a very good point. In fact, I did a webinar in terms of how to cultivate strategic thinking. And you are not the only one encountered that challenge. To be honest with you, when I was not a marketer to start with, I was a CPA. My mind is built up in certain form. It's always like things needs to be in certain order and it needs to be organized. Everything needs to have a process. That's how my mind works. So when I moved to the marketing field, it was very, very different, and creative matters, content writing matters, and the way you write matters. There are certain elements associated with it. Some of them actually you need to have a process, but certain things you don't. And it requires certain kind of gut check, especially on the marketing side. I also encountered the issue when I made that transition as first several years is how to think strategically. Every time I will present my plan and my stakeholders or my senior manager will say, okay, this is all tactics. You are not telling me your strategic approach. What are you trying to do? It took me a long time to make that transition. Kevan, I'm so happy that when you said how to be strategic, to me, that's very, very critical. It took me a long time to get to that stage. What you said resonates with me.
I say if anyone's listening or watching, like books were the way that I learned how to think about strategy. And so that was really key to me because you don't really talk about it within the workplace. It's just kind of like these people do strategy and they know what it is. It's not intuitive to learn when you see it.
It's very hard. For me, that was such an intentional learning. I have to intentionally observe. I will go to a CEO's meeting, I will go to the VP's meeting, and I will just observe intensely. Just like, what do they talk about? How do they approach things? What do they say? The type of question they ask. You literally have to just pay attention. It's very hard to teach somebody. And I think you can teach somebody to some extent, but you as an individual somehow also need to be in the trench and you need to pay attention. And I don't know how to help people to do that. Does that make sense? Because I was helping several marketers, they took on just like you. They become a leader and they feel like they need to think differently, they need to act differently. And there are some behavior I can help them to change. And they are very, very cognizant of that. But there are some thinking approach. It takes time. It just takes time to get there.
Strategy is part of the career progression. Like if you want to go from this level to this level, you need to begin thinking strategically. If people want to get to that level, we have to help them and find ways to teach that and coach that. And so oftentimes the most helpful thing for me is just being able to show them through examples of this is an example of a situation where you could have thought more strategically in this way, but it's very hard to just talk abstractly about this is generally what strategy is. It's really much more helpful to show, especially based on the examples that they're like living through and working through on a daily basis.
I hear you. All right, so one last question. I promise I say like last a couple times, but this one is really the last. So what is one place you always want to visit and never did?
I've always wanted to go to the Swiss Alps and ski them.
Oh, great choice.
Have you been?
You should definitely go. No, I never did, but I did went to one of the mountains in Switzerland. I did not ski there. I don't ski, if you will, but I went during the summertime. Absolutely gorgeous. You have to go. That's the only thing I have to say. You have to go. There's no way to describe it. It's sublime. It's sublime.
It's like strategy. You can't describe it.
You cannot describe it.
You have to experience it.
You just have to be there to absorb it. I was like, oh my God, I'm here. I mean, the scenery, the landscape, the shape of the mountain, it's incredible.
It's on the list. So yes, we'll get to it eventually.
Excellent. Kevan, thank you so much for coming to my show. It's wonderful to have you and you share so much insight with us. I am truly, truly grateful.
Great. Well, thank you, Pam.
Never miss an episode of B2B Marketing and More by following us here on YouTube and leave a comment while you're at it. You can also find episodes wherever you get your podcasts.